And still with transit, the King Street pilot project appears to be a success. This according to new data released by the city. There's a live look at King Street this morning. City officials say the project, which prioritizes public transit on the street, has led to a 35% increase in TTC ridership during the morning rush. It's also led to a 27% increase during the evening commute. The city says transit reliability is also up, with 85% of streetcars arriving within 4 minutes of their scheduled time during the morning rush. Now, on the flip side of the argument, local business owners say they are still struggling to attract people to the area.
Well, I would like to see some taxis allowed after rush hour. I would like to see the cars back. I'd like to see these patios off the road so people can park here and come to the restaurants on King Street.
And of course, Mayor John Tory is running for re-election in the October municipal election. He is pledging, if he's re-elected, on keeping to try different ideas like the King Street pilot project. For more, we are joined live in studio by the mayor himself, John Tory. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Deep.
Let's start off with the transit pilot project, since that's the story we just ran. You know, the numbers sound extremely positive in terms of ridership and efficiency, especially during the morning and the evening. So sounds like it's working from that side. But what do you say to the business owners in the area who say they're still struggling with their livelihood?
Well, I'd say to the business owners that the numbers seem to suggest that business is actually up slightly. And so I think when we went through a period of initial adjustment, when the thing began in probably a month that was difficult, like an early winter month, that things have improved with all the new patios and so on. But the most important thing I hope they can keep in mind when we look at the overall public interest is that 20,000 people are now using that streetcar who weren't using it before. And I'm assuming those people are not using their cars, which has got to be a big objective of ours. I'm assuming that they're people who came back to the King streetcar because they just got fed up with the fact they were inching along King Street. And I would point out that we've done that without the traffic being unduly adversely affected. So we'll keep working at this and making sure the businesses thrive and make sure that the streetcars keep moving faster and more reliably. But I think the trend lines are definitely in the right direction, but it's a 12-month pilot and we'll keep looking at the numbers every month.
So, yeah, so this is set to wrap up around November. Do you envision this becoming a full-time fixture down the road?
Well, I mean, we're going to see. We've said very clearly we're measuring this. The reason we have all these numbers is we're taking all these measurements. We've got sophisticated Bluetooth technology measuring the traffic. We have detailed measurement, as you can see, going on, showing a huge increase in ridership on the King streetcar and a huge increase in reliability. And we're going to measure all that and the business impact. We're going to measure that right through to the end and then take all the numbers and properly and thoughtfully look at whether it should be changed or continued as is. And we'll do that in a careful manner. But I think so far the numbers indicate it's achieving its main desired objective, which is to move more people faster and better on the streetcar, which is the busiest surface transit route in North America.
Let's shift gears. I've got you in here, so got to talk gun violence. It's been top of mind. Seems like we can't go a couple of days without hearing about a shooting. There's been another murder late last night in Rexdale that Christina's covering for us. The plan that you and Chief Saunders rolled out, more money, more officers. I know it's a small sample size since that was rolled out, but are you seeing any tangible differences, any tangible improvements?
Well, we wouldn't be doing these things if we didn't think they'd make a difference. And let's remember there's three different aspects to this. One is more resources for the police, and those have been put into place relatively recently in some cases and not yet in other cases. And so I think that will help. Second is changes to the laws. And you've heard me speaking, and I will continue to speak about the question, why does anybody in the City of Toronto need to own a handgun? And I think the federal government have been remarkably receptive to making changes to those laws. We've seen the City of Montreal get on board with that. And so I'm going to keep pushing that as well as the bail laws. And then finally, and very importantly, we have to invest in those kids and families in some of the communities where the gun violence has been more of a recurring thing. And we've got to make sure those kids are kept as far away from guns and gangs and in close to positive activities as possible. And I think all three of those taken together will make and are already making a positive difference. But this is not a simple problem, and it won't be solved overnight.
Yeah. Let's talk about City Council. We know what Doug Ford has come out with, slashing the size of council. That bill passed from 47 down to 25. You've been vocal about this. You've come out and said, listen, you can't change the rules in the middle of the game. Are you surprised by the result of the new poll that's out for CP24 and CTV, suggesting roughly half of Torontonians are in favor of smaller local government?
Not really, because as I went around the city, and I see hundreds of people every week, and they come up and talk to me about things like this, and they were indicating there was a clear clear division of opinion on the end result, which is a reduced size of city council. What they are much more united on is that they reject this process, which was done without any consultation with the city, any consultation with anybody. And I think when you're changing the rules in the middle of a game, in this case it's not a game, it's the election, the only election we have every 4 years to choose representatives, that is just not right. And so we're now left with looking at legal options, which we will do at a special council meeting on Monday on advice of our lawyers, and see if there's ways we can use the courts. But I think the fact that there's a division in public opinion with some in favor, in fact more in favor than against, doesn't come as a complete surprise. I think you'd find if the question had said, what do you think of the way he did it, without consultation, you'd have a very, very substantial number saying not in the right way. It was done in a way that was, I think, indefensible and was disrespectful of the fact that the City of Toronto and the people of the City of Toronto deserve to be consulted.
Now, I know we'll know a lot more Monday in terms of potential legal battle here, but do you envision some type of legal fight, and do you think that could sort of kick the can down the road far enough to delay it beyond this October election, because it's coming up fast?
I'll only say to you that I met with 5 lawyers, and they were not advising the city formally. They just came in at my request and some of the very leading lawyers in the country and asked them about the law in this area, and their advice was more positive than I thought. It's an uphill battle because the province holds many of the cards when it comes to their right to dictate what happens with cities. The point is they shouldn't be dictating it. They should be consulting, they should be sitting down, they should be talking, they should be looking at options, listening to the people. I suggested a referendum. They don't seem to have embraced that. But we'll see what happens with the law. We've got to get the advice in what likely will be a confidential meeting on Monday, and then we'll have to decide what happens and what the consequences of that could be.
Well, stay tuned for that. Last question for you. Pot legalization is coming. We know municipalities sort of have the right of refusal here. We've seen the mayors of Richmond Hill and Markham come out and say, not in our backyard. What is your stance on pot?
I don't think it's reasonable to expect the City of Toronto, and of course it would be a council decision, to come out and say not in our backyard in a city of 3 million people. I think what I want to see, and I'm glad the province is doing this very carefully. They're taking the time to do it right, because our main concerns remain the same, which is to make sure neighborhoods and businesses and schools and kids remain sort of safe and protected from the wrong people getting their hands on pot when it's legalized, and on the issue of cost. We don't want to see city taxpayers burdened with a whole lot of extra costs from having to enforce the law, but I'd be very doubtful that the City of Toronto Council, and I certainly wouldn't be leading the way to say not in our backyard in the City of Toronto. I don't think that's realistic when the national laws are going to be changed. And the Prime Minister campaigned on this and got elected, and they've changed the laws. Parliament passed it, so I think for us to say not in our backyard would not be a productive way to deal with this.
I'm actually being told we have just a little bit more time, so I'm going to throw one more question at you. The other part of the poll I'll circle back to was that 57% supposedly support the PC government taking control of the TTC. What do you have to say to that?
I think what it asked about was taking some degree of responsibility for the subway.
Yeah.
And I've just said, look, I can't really comment on that, pro or con, until we actually see what the deal is. I can tell you right now, if they try to do it in the way that they did the City Council, without consultation, they just in one night come forward in the dark and say, here it is, I'll be very upset about that, and I think the Council will be. I think the people of Toronto will be. We'll have to see a deal, and not only a deal, a good deal. If there's going to be a good deal that's so good for us, as we keep hearing, well, then let's see it. Let's see what the deal is. And I don't mean we have to see it right away, but let's do this thoughtfully and carefully. Let's have public consultation. In fact, I insist on that the public, the TTC, the city staff, the City Council be properly consulted about our subway, paid for with our tax dollars, and operated by us and ridden on by people from the city every day. So why not take the time to consult and to listen? And if it's such a great idea that everybody supports it, well, then I guess it'll be obvious, when the terms of what they're proposing come out. But so far, there's been no detail, just these kind of very simple statements that, of course, some people will agree with.
Do you feel like you're in full-on campaign mode?
Well, look, I'm just doing my job. Most
Right.
of what we've talked about today is the ongoing duties of being the mayor, and I have to continue to be responsible for the affairs of the city. But I have to go out at the same time and debate things and hold my opponent to account for. I mean, she hasn't said much about what she would do yet. Hasn't answered some pretty basic questions. So I have to do all that, but that's fine. I mean, we'll see how it all unfolds. We got 70 days or so left.
Who's counting, right?
Yeah,
2 months away.
I am.
Mayor John Tory, thanks so much for coming. We
You're
appreciate
welcome.
it.